Thank you so much for being here tonight. That was Gloria Steinem speaking at WITI's very first summit in 1995. And the message that I never forgot when she spoke at our summit was, use your knowledge of technology to make the world a better place. And that message is such an important message for all of us now more than ever before. So it's great to see so many of you that I saw here last year. It's wonderful to see new friends who are coming for the first time. I'm just so happy you're here, and we are so fortunate to have with us today Senator Hannah-Beth Jackson, who authored the bill requiring California public companies to have women on their boards. That bill became effective. So when I read about what Senator Jackson accomplished, I was so amazed that not only did she present the bill, but she actually got it passed and made into law, because those of us who know anything about history know that nothing changes until there's a law requiring the change, unfortunately. But that's just the way it is. And Senator Jackson, if you would come up on the stage, please. Please welcome Senator Jackson.
Oh, wow.
So, Senator Jackson, I am proud to present you with the 2019 WITI Champion Award. Senator Jackson is a major champion for women working on all kinds of legislation to make our lives better, and Senator Jackson will tell you all about it shortly.
Great. Well, thank you so much. Thank you. I feel as though I just won the Academy Award. Thank you very much.
So I just want to say one more thing before you speak, because we have another award to give. So I want all of you to be inspired, because here is a woman who made a decision to make a difference. Every one of you in this room has the same opportunity and power by the decisions you make to wake up every morning and ask yourself, how can I make the world a better place? How can I make a better difference today? So there's nothing extraordinary about leaders except that we make the decision to make a difference, and you can too. So please think about that. I have one more award to give before Senator Jackson speaks. And Ava, will you come up? I'm going to wear a bow like that next year in my hair. So today we have officially launched Mini WITI.
Good evening, WITI. Good evening, awesome ladies, and all the men who are here as strong allies. We salute you. I was thinking as I listened to Caroline's speech, 30 years, what an accomplishment. And thought about this quote. It's my favorite quote. She believed she could, so she did. She turned her can'ts into cans and her dreams into plans. Her can'ts into cans and her dreams into plans. Earlier today, Carolyn was speaking about starting WITI 30 years ago, then and now. And it really grabbed me what you said. Then it was about making a contribution. I want to make a contribution. I don't want to be held back as a woman in technology. And now, I'm ready to stand up and be a leader. Now, we in this room are those butterflies. We can have an impact. It's time we stand up as mentors, as sponsors, as coaches, and as leaders. So, I'm honored to be this year's Mistress of Ceremonies, and I have the distinct honor to introduce California State Senator Hannah-Beth Jackson, who's here with us today. And we had a little chat, and she shared that she has been fighting for women's rights since she was denied the opportunity to be in Little League at the age of 7. She is a stand for equal opportunity for women. She represents the 19th district, which includes all of Santa Barbara County and West Ventura County. Now listen to this. She has worked with Democrat and Republican governors to author more than 100 bills into law. One of the bills is the strongest equal pay bill in the country. State Senator Jackson was named by Huffington Post as one of the women blazing new trails in America's politics. So she's just amazing. And one thing that really, as Carolyn Leighton shared, her recent legislation, Senate bill, listen to this because we're going to talk about it all over the country. Senate Bill number 826, Google it, learn it, share it with politicians, mandates that any publicly owned corporation in the state of California must have at least one woman on their board of advisors. So please welcome to the stage Senator Hannah-Beth Jackson. Now, Rene Redwood will be moderating our conversation with Senator Jackson today. And she is our own WITI Advisory Board member. She's also on the board, for basketball fans, of the WNBA Mystics female basketball team. She is a stand for accessing opportunity for girls, especially girls of color. So WITI could not have dreamed, Rene, of having a better partner than the partnership in you. In 1995, she worked with Carolyn to formalize the relationship with the Presidential Federal Glass Ceiling Commission, where Rene was the executive director. They worked to bring tangible, real-life solutions to high-tech corporations. Carolyn and Rene moved very quickly because the commission was about to expire, and they organized a meeting between many notable high-tech companies, the Federal Glass Ceiling Commission, and WITI. The final recommendations of the commission, whose language Rene authored and managed, would eventually permeate the corporate high-tech world. In 1996, Rene keynoted WITI's second summit to declare hiring and promoting women and minorities makes good business sense. It's not just good, it's good for business. A phrase that has become a common rallying point in the fight to break the glass ceiling. Rene's been honored by the Smithsonian. I just learned this as we were talking, Rene, as a freedom sister, African-American women who have trailblazed for civil rights and women's rights.
Good afternoon. Part of the work I do is around diversity, inclusion, equity, and welcoming. And there's a sub-Saharan African greeting that's known as Sawubona. Sawubona meaning I see you. So part of greeting and demonstrating dignity and respect for others is to recognize them. So when I say Sawubona, you can say Sawubona, I see you. Or you can respond with Sikona. Sikona meaning I am here. I am here. And what are we doing? That's about having our attention. So Sawubona.
Sawubona.
Sikona. Senator, it's wonderful to be here with you all. Just one more piece about me. I'm a first-generation American born in the shadow of the Statue of Liberty to immigrants. My mom and dad came to this country in the early 50s because they believed if you worked hard, you could succeed. And while they did not know each other on the island of Jamaica, they actually met in Japan. And so as a kid, I called myself a Jap, a Jamaican-American princess. To get a little about, so you know about my basketball passion, and it's such an honor to be here with the senator today, and the honor to be here with Carolyn, who when the Glass Ceiling Commission, the Civil Rights Act of 1991, established a 21-member bipartisan commission to look at the barriers that impede the advancement of women and minorities. And the commission was tasked with looking at findings, what was the status, where were we as a nation, and recommendations. But it didn't mandate action, right? And so when I met Carolyn, it was a question of how do we take ideas and turn them into a plan? And so part of that work has allowed me to be able to do many of the things I'm able to do today. And it was trailblazing for my family. I was the first person in my family to receive a college degree. And so that was breaking a glass ceiling for my family. And that's some of the work that Senator Jackson does. So, Senator Jackson, tell us a little bit about your background. What got you to the Senate?
Well, I was mentioned very seriously. When I was a little girl, I loved sports. This surprised my parents, but they were willing to let me sort of reach out and become the person that I was intended to be. And that was very liberating, and sports was really one of the areas where I found I had a great interest and passion. I was also quite good at it. And so when I was 7 and went down to try out for Little League down at the schoolyard, I was told that I was not even going to be able to try out because girls were not allowed to play Little League. And as Rene just said, this is America. In America, if you play by the rules, you do your best, and you work hard, anything is possible. That's right. That's what my grandparents, who came to this country from Eastern Europe during the times of the pogroms in Eastern Europe and in Russia, they came here because that was the promise of America, and they taught us those values. And when I wasn't allowed to play Little League, I was very, very upset, and my parents gave me my first lesson in civics, and that was, in America, if you feel as though something has gone on that's wrong, that you've been wrong, that we have a right to redress our grievances. I'm sure they didn't use those words then, but that's what it is. And that we could go out and write a request to the powers that be that would change their thinking. And so together we put together a petition, and went around to the neighbors to ask them to sign that would recommend and urge the powers that be to let girls play baseball, to play in Little League. And some of the neighbors signed it, and some of them patted me on the head and said, "Oh, isn't that sweet? Why don't you go back and play with your dolls?" And around Halloween, I remembered those people, and and they remembered me. And so I was determined. Oh, and by the way, I never heard back from the Little League Association. And I said, you know, someday they're going to regret this. And here I am. So that's really how it started.
And what did you do before you were a senator? What was your career?
Well, I actually went to law school back in the early to mid-'70s. I came from the era of the Vietnam War, where we really became activated as students because there was a war going on in a place that nobody knew about. Nobody understood why there was this war going on. And my male friends were all being drafted because we had a draft. If they stayed in college, they were okay, but the minute they graduated, they would be subject to being drafted and going into the military, even though they were not old enough to vote. And the notion we were old enough to kill, old enough for these young men primarily to be drafted, but weren't old enough to vote, really raised the hackles of our youth. And we had protests, and we had people shot and killed because they were protesting. And this really activated my interest in the law. So I went on to law school. I was among the 10% of law students in my class who were female, and that was generally the way it went there. And I started off my legal career as a deputy district attorney in Santa Barbara. I'd grown up outside of Boston and recognized that you don't have to suffer through winter if you don't want to. And so I came to California after law school and started working for the Santa Barbara District Attorney's Office. I then went into private practice and got involved, and as I hope all of you will, in nonprofit work. I was very actively involved in the Women Lawyers Association of Los Angeles, where we became very active and would endorse or not endorse candidates running for office. And so the endorsement of the Women Lawyers Association became an important endorsement to get. And from that, we were able to extract commitments of diversity from many of these candidates. And I realized that there was power in the political world. And so I practiced law for 22 years, was very friendly with some of the leading women, again, networking, something that I hope you will all do while you're here. Met some extraordinary women who mentored me, and when the opportunity came to run for public office, like most things in life, it really is a question of timing. I hit the timing just perfectly and was elected to the California Assembly back in 1998. I served for the then term-limited 6 years. Then, as a result of redistricting, which was not kind to women at the time, I started a couple nonprofits. I actually did a radio show. You know, when you're a lawyer, you love to talk, and when you're a politician, that makes it even worse. And so I did a radio show. I taught at the University of California, Santa Barbara. And then back in 2012, I ran for office after they redistricted to make the district look more like the people who were to be represented, and have served in the state senate ever since. And I have another year and a half before I'm term limited out. So I've been trying to make as much mischief as I can in that period of time.
Wonderful. So, Senator, part of your passion is clearly your history is about breaking down barriers, creating opportunities. Talk a little bit about your legislative agenda.
Sure.
Please.
Well, again, I think that the promise of America I take very seriously. And that is a promise that we will give opportunity to people who will work hard, who will do their best, who will play by the rules, who do have vision, who do have that sense of hard work, have that sense of community, a sense of responsibility. And certainly the notion that we have left out 52% of the population over the course of time because of biology, and frankly, for no other reason. It really has motivated me to fight as hard as I can to make sure that women and anyone has opportunity to be successful. So my first commitment, of course, has always been to girls and to women. Again, if we're good enough to play in the game, which we are, then we should have every opportunity to do so. I mean, that's a basic fundamental concept for me. And so the work I've done, certainly there are areas that are important to my community. If you've ever been to Santa Barbara or Ventura, the coast is magnificent, and it is truly a natural beauty. And if you are a believer in a higher power, this is a gift that we received, and we have a responsibility to protect it to the best of our ability. So the environment has always been important. But equal opportunity has always been important to me. I don't care anything about your gender orientation, your sexual preferences. I don't care what nationality you are, what religion you are. It is who you are as a human being, the content of your character, as Martin Luther King said in one of his famous speeches. And so I have fought very hard to make sure that doors are not closed to people, and particularly to women, on the basis of our gender. And so there are things that we need as women in order to have that opportunity for success. One of them certainly has been equal pay. If we're doing the job, we deserve to be paid equally. Another one is that we are the gender that reproduces and that keeps society going. But those are our bodies, and we should have the ability and the right and the dignity to be able to make those decisions, the most important decisions. The most important decision that we make as women is whether, when, and with whom we choose to have a family. And I heard this, one of those epiphanal moments that we all have, from that very woman, Gloria Steinem, many years ago. I was just out of college, and she was speaking in West LA, and she was a feminist. I wasn't quite sure what that word meant. You know, they say, what is a feminist? I only know people call me that when I express sentiments that differentiate me from a doormat. And so... And so I heard this incredibly gorgeous woman, you know, feminists. They were ugly and fat and hated men and all this kind of stuff. That's what we were told feminists were. And here was this incredibly articulate, beautiful, clearly a very sensual person who was talking about her moment of epiphany about reproductive rights. And she was in India. And I'll never forget this, and trust me, it was a long time ago. She talked about how she saw so many unwanted children. There was no birth control in India, and women were having 9, 10, 11, 12 children, and they were treated as broodmares. She said, at that moment, when I realized, the light bulb went on, that we will never achieve or be able to achieve equality unless we are able to control our own reproductive destiny. Yeah. And that was a moment that struck me. So equal pay, the right to control our own reproduction, and as women who are the reproducing element in our society, if we choose to work, or in today's world, because we have to work in so many instances, and I'll get to that statistic in a minute. I'll let you prompt me, because otherwise I'll just ramble on for the next 42 minutes.
I'm enjoying it myself.
So we have a challenge in this world, and that is, how do we recognize that women are working, that we are incredibly competent, that we're probably going to be the ones to find the cure for cancer, or what have you, or it may have been our little, how old was that young lady who was with us? Ava? 8. She may be the one to find the cure for cancer. I hope so. That we are needing to find an accommodation in today's world to recognize that women are indeed the childbearers, that the process will require certain kinds of flexibility in the workforce, that biologically we want to bond with our children. And we're finding, too, that our younger men today also want to bond with their children, many of whom remember that they very rarely saw their own fathers and grew up essentially without them, and are committed to making sure that doesn't happen to this generation. But how do we make that happen? So one of my big battles over the course of time has been to expand paid family leave and to make sure that women have the right to take time to early bond with a newborn, and that dads will also be given that opportunity. So I've been doing legislation on this here in California. We do have a paid family leave program that was started by one of my mentors, a woman named Sheila Kuehl. Some of you may know Sheila. She started this program. We passed it, I think, in 2002 or 2004. I was honored to support the program. And it's a program, though, that you as an employee pay. It's not an employer-paid program. So as an employee, you put a little bit of your monthly salary. If you get one of those checks and there's a little pie thing that tells you where the heck all your money went, there's a little portion of it that goes for unemployment insurance. And of that, there's also a little sliver that goes into this paid family leave program, so that when you need that, you can get significantly reimbursed for the lost time you have at work. The employer doesn't pay it, you pay it. But what we found is that if you work for a company of 50 or more, you have the right to access that, and you'll get some job-protected leave. But if you don't work for a larger company like that, you're paying into a system, but you can't access it. You can't access your own money, because if you work for a company of under 50, your job isn't protected. So what do women do? What we find is that so many women have had to go back to work prematurely, and they don't have access to infant child care. What are you supposed to do when that happens? So we find many women stop working. They get off of I won't call it a treadmill, but they get off of the opportunity to continue working and continue achieving and to continue getting promotions and moving up the ladder. They leave. Or they have a family member who does the child care. But that's not really good child care. We know that our youngsters today, because of the brain mapping and the technology that perhaps some of you are involved in, the critical time for a child is from 0 to 3. That is when the critical brain development happens. So we want to have child care that really is educational. We've changed it now. We don't call it child care. It's early care and education. Now, granted, a lot of people have trouble knowing what the heck that is, but we're trying to recognize that the child has needs, an infant has needs, a new mother has needs. When we allow a parent, a mother, and I'm telling this because I hope you're all going to go out and commit to this when you become the leaders of your companies. When women have the time to bond with the child, 12 weeks at a minimum, we reduce the amount of postpartum depression by a third. By a third, just by giving moms that opportunity to bond with their newborn. We know for men, when they get that opportunity, life ain't all so wonderful when Father Knows Best used to come home or Leave It to Beaver and the kids had been bathed and done their homework and they had been fed and mom's putting a gourmet meal down for dad along with his double martini and with a big smile on her face, high heels, fully coiffed. Did any of you ever see those shows? I could never figure out what in the world, how did they spend their days? Well, obviously doing nothing. But that isn't the world we live in today. And we know when dads have to take some of that responsibility, get up in the middle of the night, change a dirty diaper, change a dirty diaper, change another dirty diaper, that they become bonded with that child and it creates a lifelong bond. So this is all a big plus. These are the kinds of things that I've been working on. And I'll have to tell you, the biggest challenge I've had is the traditional business community. They say it's bad for business, but we know that isn't true. So those are some of the things, and I haven't even gotten to the bill of women on corporate boards, but I'll let you go back and ask some more questions.
So what about the bill of women in corporate boards? But before we just, one of the things that you talked about, one of the recommendations from the Glass Ceiling Commission was to address the issue around family work balance. Mm-hmm. Now, one of the things we actually know now that that's almost a misnomer, right? Because part of my life, work-life balance, family work-life balance, my life has work in it, so it's not like it's optional, but more importantly, my family is never optional. And how do we create institutions and organizations that recognize the fullness of who we are as individuals? How do we create workspaces where we can bring the best of who we are, which means all of who we are?
Right.
And so that's some of the work when we talk about changing the workplace culture.
And of course, the bill I did last year focused on parental leave, newborn leave. But we also, as women, tend to be the caregivers for our parents as they age. And again, when you have a parent going through either a last illness or a serious illness, who's going to be there? Our healthcare system does not adequately provide for the care of our seniors. And California, for example, is becoming an aging state. We are a negative birth rate state. We have fewer babies being born than we have seniors entering into their senior years. And we have very little in the way of adequate care for our aging seniors. So it's going to be left to some of you who are in your middle years. We call it sort of the sandwich generation. You're caring for young children, you're caring for your aging parents, you're working 12, 14 hours a day. I mean, we're exhausted, right? Isn't that kind of what has happened? We need to change that because we just can't function doing it all as much as we have tried. And so what's happened is, I know in my generation, we did try to have it all. And that's why I've got all this gray hair at such a young age.
Right? And that's why all of mine fell off.
That's right. So what we're trying to do is recognize that today's working women need to have some form of flexibility. And we need our male partners to be there with us, or our partners in general, to be there. And we need our companies, our businesses, our big corporate interests, our tech world, to really be in the lead on that. And it's been frustrating for me because, as I said, the biggest challenge, the biggest hurdle for me in so much of this work has been the Chamber of Commerce, the big corporate industries, the manufacturers associations and others. And yet in some of the tech community, and I want to encourage, and that's why I want all of you on corporate boards, to recognize, as Rene pointed out, we are holistic. We are not just people who work 10, 12, 14 hours a day. We have human needs. We have families. We have partners. We should be having relationships, whether it's friends or a life partner. I guess serial life partner in today's world we see a lot more of. But we are human beings, and we must recognize that, and we must create a world that is going to better accommodate those needs and our humanity. And those are sort of the things that motivate me to do the work I do.
You know, you talk about humanity, and one of the challenges with technology is attention, right? It's called an attention economy, and how technology is taking our attention. How many people have kids, and when you're sitting with them, they're busy on this as opposed to looking at you when you're talking, or partners who are busy doing this as opposed to looking at you? And so we're beginning to remove the humanity from relationships because of technology. I know that's an area you've been talking about, Senator. How can we help expand the conversation to bring humanity back into relationships, even when we spend time with this?
You know, part of the problem that we're having in today's world is that we're lacking that interconnection. People communicate with each other by text. I was saying earlier.
I just sent you one.
That, but I didn't bring my phone with me up on stage, although I tend to do the same thing. We're all fascinated by it. And yet, when was the last time you had a difficult conversation with somebody by interconnection, by looking at them face to face? It's so much easier, as we were talking earlier, where people have a relationship and then decide they don't want a relationship anymore, so they send you a text, "I'm breaking up with you." What? So you don't realize that there's pain and there's suffering and there's angst and there's humanity involved. There are all sorts of emotions that we experience at difficult times like that. And we don't engage in them. So what has happened in this world today? We're lacking compassion. We lack it in the political world, certainly. We're lacking it in all of our activities. We're losing that human dimension. We're lacking compassion, empathy, and perhaps most importantly, kindness. Kindness to each other. It's easier to communicate with a machine, with a screen, than it is to touch or to talk or to share a tear or an embrace. Appropriate embrace, of course, we're talking about now. But we are not having those relationships. In fact, one of the shocking things that happen, and I admit I'm a little older generation, so I get it. There's a lot happening that I don't understand, but neither did my parents either, so I don't feel that I'm totally left out. It's generational, is that the world changes, technology is taken over in ways that I can't understand. I mean, talk about feeling deflated when I had to have my 6-year-old granddaughter this weekend show me how to use one of the apps that I had on my phone. Oh, Hannah-Beth, she said, that's easy. Clunk, 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 there, Hannah-Beth. You know, I felt a little stupid, but we are in a slightly different world. So last year I sit on the Labor and Human Relations Committee in the Senate, and I had one of my staffers was preparing me for the day's hearings because there are so many bills you can't read them all yourself. And he was saying, now we have a bill coming up. This is SB blah blah blah. It's a bill on basic human social skills. I said, what are basic social skills? He said, well, there are things like knowing what time to get up in the morning, knowing what time you're supposed to be at work, knowing that you're supposed to bathe more than once every 2 weeks, changing your underwear, brushing your teeth. I said, no, you are kidding. He said, no, I am not kidding. And although I suspect most of us hopefully don't know too many people like that, you have to admit when all you do all day long is talk to a screen, you lose that humanity. And so what's happening is we're disconnecting. We're disconnecting. The people running a lot of the tech world are men. And many of them, and I know them, the young men who are, gurus and visionaries in the tech world, have the worst people skills on the planet. They have no idea what it's like to shake hands with someone, look them in the eye, have a conversation. These are the people that are making the rules for tomorrow. And so what I hope that all of you will do is step up and say, no, no, no. We are not going to live like this. We are not going to raise our children to be this. We are not going to interact with other people this way. I have staff that they'll come over my house to give me some work that I need to do. They'll text me that they're there. I say to them, I have a doorbell. I don't bring my phone with me everywhere I go. Just ring the doorbell. And so simple things like this. Why ring the doorbell when you can say, I'm in the car? Well, get out of the car and ring the doorbell and come on in and have some lemonade or something. It's just astonishing. And it is my hope and why I was so committed to getting women on corporate boards. We have got to be the change makers of the future. There is just no question about it. So if you want to ask another question, before I dive right in.
I do. Why is a corporate board so important?
Well, corporate.
And let me maybe take a step back. Part of it is the question of we still have barriers when we look at leadership of institutions, whether it's public sector, private sector, nonprofits. We still see a disproportionate number of the senior decision makers and the people in controlling budgets tend to be male or male identified.
White male identified in most instances as
to-
well. Let's get real.
Let's get
Come
real.
on.
Right.
When you take a look at who's there when the current occupant of the White House signs anything. I'm not sure it's even a signature, but you know, whatever it is, it's all white men. And it's frustrating because, with all due respect, they haven't done such a great job. And I think we can do just as good, if not better, a job.
You know, it's interesting as I look around the room, every time you've said something about men, it's been the fellas that I at least can identify are the ones who are like,
We need
You know,
more.
and we need more of you to speak
That's
up.
right, because you're our partners in this.
Right.
And you know, it's very interesting. There was a case that just came down a couple weeks ago. I can't remember what. There was a major company that a dad had sued this company for discrimination because he hadn't been given the parental leave that his wife had gotten for their newborn. It took a man to win this case. I think it was a $4 million judgment. I don't know if it was Merrill Lynch or some big company. And you know, at the end of the day, I was both pleased and frustrated that it was, well, at least men are stepping up now. But darn, did it have to take a guy for them to pay attention to the fact that parents really do need to have time to bond with their newborn children? Is that really what it's going to take? And being in the political world, you know, we take it any way we can get it. If that's what it's going to take to get equality, well, okay, we'll do that. But we should be the ones raising the discussion and celebrating and bringing our male partners along with us. It's critically important. Today, we have this us versus them. And so what we need is for us to all be kind of finding that point of commonality. We talked about that today in our group. We all share our humanity in common. We just have to get there. And that's the challenge that we face today. One of the ways we get there, the last bastion of almost total male domination is the corporate C-suite. And corporations are basically driving the future in this country and in this world. And it is being driven by tech companies. Technology is the future worldwide. But technology and corporate existence are basically amoral. Now, I'm not saying immoral. There are no rules other than to make money. We, either government or having more women in that corporate boardroom, have to set the standards, the priorities, and the values. Because I don't care how much artificial intelligence is going to be, you know, a great panacea, it's not a panacea. Because we are human beings. We breathe, we cry, we feel pain, we feel joy. We want the next generations to be better than we are. We always are, our goal is always to improve. I can't say we always get there, but that is what we strive for, is to give our next generation a better world than the world that we inherited. It is part of our human condition to do this. And yet when you look at how business is being run, you look how the tech world totally destroyed any sense of privacy. God only knows what artificial intelligence is going to do. I worry about it. I don't understand it as well as many of you do. But we have to put an overlay of our human values on everything that we are going to be doing in the future. And I believe it is the women who will be doing this. So I want more women on corporate boards for a number of reasons. First of all, we're damn well qualified.
Yes.
So why shouldn't we be on corporate boards? You know, our biology should not be what determines how companies are being run. We have incredibly qualified women out there. We also bring a whole different life experience to the table. You know, we just have different experiences. You can't always explain it. Women of color have different experiences from women who are not of color. Different groups have different experiences, ethnicities, religions, people from different socioeconomic backgrounds. We all have a story to tell. We've all come from somewhere that's both fascinating and challenging. How did we get to where we are today? That's what we want to bring to the table. So we can make life better for the next generation. So we can give ourselves that opportunity. So we can make sure that as we age, we can age with dignity. We can age not in isolation. We can age with family, with friends, with community, with our contemporaries. There is so much that we can do with technology, but we cannot let technology rule the day, because then we lose our humanity. And I think we as women understand that. So let's get women on corporate boards. Why have we not been able to do that? Well, as I mentioned earlier today, Nancy Pelosi actually said it pretty well. She said, people don't give you power. You have to take it. And so I did a resolution back in 2013 with the help of a group called NAWBO. I don't know if any of you are familiar, National Association of Women Business Owners. We did a resolution that called on corporations, publicly traded corporations that are headquartered in California. We urged them to add more women to their corporate boards. We showed them the data, showed them that when you have women in a significant and a critical mass on your corporate boards and in high management, companies are more productive, they're more profitable, so the shareholder benefits. They're more transparent, they have better governance. There are all sorts of reasons to put women on corporate boards. We urge them to do this. At the time, 15.5% of all corporate board seats were held by women in these California companies. 2018, 5 years later, we had kicked that needle all the way up from 15.5% to 16%. So obviously, asking politely had gotten us nowhere. So I did this legislation. Now, I want to correct you. There is no mandate here, because mandates tend to be illegal, having quotas. We require companies to add women to their corporate boards. Okay, mandate, require. I'm a lawyer. We like to argue semantics. But basically what this means is that if you are a corporation that is headquartered in California and you have 5 or fewer board members, by July, I believe it is July of 2019, coming up real fast, you have to have at least 1 woman on your board. By the end of 2021, if you're a board of 6 or more, you have to have at least 3 women on your corporate boards. Why 3? Because, as I had mentioned earlier, if there's 1 and only 1 and you're the first woman, you're likely to be expected to take the notes and to go out and get the coffee. If you're one of 2, usually you're fighting between the 2 of you as to which one is going to go out and get the coffee. If there are 3 or more, you're going to look at each other and say, the heck with this, they're going to go out and get their own damn coffee. And so not only are major decisions, do we need to have women as part of that decision-making process. After all, we hold up at least half the sky. But to me, what's also important is to change the corporate culture for employees. So if you're a big company, you have employees, many of whom are extraordinarily gifted, and many of those are women. And many of them are of childbearing years. Many of them want to have families. We should not put these women into the position where it's either or. This is the 21st century. We have over 50%, some say it's even higher, of the workforce is comprised of women. Of that number, 70% of those women, of the women in the workforce today, are there either because they are the sole breadwinner of their family, the primary breadwinner of their family, or their incomes are necessary for their families to be able to make ends meet in today's world. So we need to recognize and be responsive to the needs of our younger women and all our women, because you have children, you have parents, you have an uncle, you have a nephew. As a family unit, we have shaved it down from the larger nuclear family, where we included aunts and uncles. And someone I was talking to, Carol, one of 11 children. We don't do that anymore. We don't do that anymore. And we are, if at all, a nuclear family that is comprised of very few people. How are we going to take care of each other in those circumstances? We need to recognize that women are still the primary caregivers, whether it's to our parents or whether it's to our children. and that we want to have a workforce that is robust and is representative of the entire population. And so my hope is as we put women on these corporate boards, we start doing things like having on-site childcare in bigger companies. May I ask, how many of you are in companies of, let's say, 500 or more employees? How many of you have on-site childcare at those companies?
Wow.
Take note. There is no reason that your companies should not have a dedicated space where you provide on-site childcare. I have in my district a company called Patagonia. You've all heard of Patagonia? Patagonia is a privately held company, but they have had on-site childcare at Patagonia for over 35 years. 35 years. They now are into their second and third generation of employees whose parents, actually even grandparents, worked there. And they grew up there. They grew up there. And when you talk to the owners of the company, they can't understand why more companies don't do this. Because when people leave, you've got to retrain new people. And it takes time for them to develop and become expert in these areas. And when you have on-site childcare, particularly for little ones, moms can go out and nurse, you know, during a break. They'll never take the full time, available for a lunch break. They want to go out and have lunch with their kids. And they are better workers because they're not worried, did somebody pick my child up today? There's less stress. So they're more productive. I mean, and it's also just human decency. So I am hopeful that as you are the next group out there, you say in your company, in fact, I have a Sheryl Sandberg story from prior to her work with Facebook when things kind of went a little bit downhill. But she was one of the few women in positions of leadership, and she talked about the fact that when she was very pregnant with one of her children, she had been off campus, and I can't remember what company it was she was working for, and was it Google? And she came back for a meeting, a board meeting or some kind of meeting in the afternoon about 2 o'clock, and could not find a place to park except way back in the boonies. And she said, I walked into this meeting, I was 7 months pregnant, I was sweating like a horse, I was having trouble, I was waddling into the meeting, I sat down, she said, and I said to him, we need pregnancy parking in this place. She said the next day there were 3, 4, 5 rows parking places for pregnancy parking. Can you think of a man who would have said we need pregnancy parking in our facility? So that's just an example of why we bring our own experience, and our experience should be respected. One of the other statistics that I'll share with you before we go back, because this is kind of mind-numbing. I'm doing a bill now or I'm trying to do a bill now that is going to give women, new parents, new moms, 3 months of job-protected leave, no matter from a company of 5 or more. And then to give an additional 3 months to a designated person. Why? Not just say to the dad or to the other spouse. 40% of all births today in California are coming to unmarried, single women who have no partner. 40%. That is a staggering statistic. And so as we think of the world we live in, we've got to think of it differently than we did 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. You are those people. You're the visionaries of the future. You're the entrepreneurs. You're the creative influences. This not only is possible, but we know there are countries in the world that are doing this and doing it well. Why in the world can't the United States of America? I know of no reason.
Great. Thank you, Senator. I want to open the floor up for folks if you have questions for the Senator.
Woo. All right, that woke up all those sleeping people.
So raise your hand because we have people with mics. Where are the mic people? Okay, thank you. And say your name, please.
Yes, my name is Kenitra Williams. I work for T-Mobile. I just wanted to know, what is the penalty, if any, for a company who does not meet the number of board members by the July date and then the subsequent 2020 date?
The penalty is the cost or what you would have paid, what a company would have paid to a director had she been put on the board. So if director's compensation in some of the big companies, $200,000, $300,000 a year, that's the penalty. Okay. And it continues every year until they find those qualified women. There's also another penalty. It's the penalty of public opinion. Mm-hmm. I have every intention of calling out every of those companies in California that does not find a woman to put on their corporate boards. And by the way, there are other companies throughout the country, both private and non-California-based companies, that recognize the importance of adding women to their boards. We haven't heard of a single lawsuit yet. Do you want to be the company that's known as the company that doesn't want women on your board? I don't think so.
Over there, and then we have a person right here. Yeah, please. Volume.
Hi, I'm Savita. I had my daughter in Singapore, actually, so I benefited from 16 weeks fully paid by my employer. And then my colleagues in Australia were saying, why don't you have your child in Australia? Because you get 1 year full leave, right. Paid leave. Right. Same thing with the UK. My colleagues in UK had full 1 year off, paid by the employer. So I'm curious to understand why your bill is still not pushing the onus on the employer. Why is it still through my paycheck or through the women's paycheck?
That is such a good question. And here's the reason why. The corporate world, the business world today, does not want to expand leave for its workers. And part of that is because it's something different, and it's being run by men. These are not women-run companies. What they say is the company, well, first of all, they're going to leave California. Everybody's going to leave California. That's why California is the 5th largest economy in the world. Mm-hmm. But that's a little disconnect that we hear a lot. It's the status quo. And part of it, frankly, is that these corporations are big players in the world of politics. Mm-hmm. And a lot of politicians listen very carefully to the people who have the money. It's as polite as I can say it. If we could take money out of politics, I think we'd have a year of paid and job-protected leave in this country. They do it in Scandinavia. Mm-hmm. They do it in Australia. They do it in France. They do it in the UK. And last I looked at, these were all countries that are doing very well, thank you. So I'd love to do more. I'm having a big battle reducing the size of the company from 20 down to 5. You know, they say, oh, there are no workers out there. I can't afford to pay them, even though they can afford to pay them because they're not paying for the people who aren't working. There aren't enough workers. The company will collapse because we need to have people who know the job. I mean, you can find any and every excuse in the world. And I look at them and I say, gosh, you're the entrepreneurs and the visionaries of the future. Anything is possible. Figure it out, right? We can make it happen, sure. But good question.
Thank you. You see a hand over there? Oh, over here? Yes.
Senator Jackson, this has been an inspiration listening to you this evening. While we are working on maternal leaves and everything, is it possible to have an hour in a week off to see a baseball game of your child? I don't know. Because honestly, I'm a mom of a very lovely baseball boy, and there's so many times I miss his practices, and I would love to be there and love to watch his games they have during the week. As much as our employers are understanding, but I just feel so guilty leaving my work and going off to watch his game. But maybe we can make it official so I feel less burdened.
So part of the problem is you feel guilty.
That's true.
You should not feel guilty.
Right.
Yes.
It is as important for your son.
Thank you.
It is important for your son to see you at that game, even though he'll probably pretend like he doesn't know you. Isn't that right? It's important that you're there to support him. And you go to your employer. Now, California companies, we do have a little bit of flexibility that people can take a little bit of time off. A lot of employers, though, they strongly discourage that, but it is your right to do that. And I would just say to all of us in this room, you know, being a parent in today's world is just simply not easy. But we do have a responsibility to ourselves and to our children to be there for them. Because there will be a point where they'll barely remember us. I think it starts at, what, about 13 or 14? Right. And I have a daughter who's 34, and I think I'm just getting over that point of being annoying and embarrassing. But it's really critically important. You know, in today's world, there has to be that human connection, and there's no bond more powerful than a bond between a parent and a child.
And these years are never going to come back, right? So that's why.
They do never come back.
I never miss this game, but I do have that guilt sometimes.
Well, don't feel guilty. And you know what? Employers should encourage that, because you're going to get that work done in less time because you know you have something else to do. You betcha.
You know, Senator, one of the things I also want to ask you is we talk about family and parental leave. I don't have children, but I have a dad. Mm-hmm. And Dad's 90. And I've had to take on increasing parenting responsibility, caregiving responsibility. And so as we begin to think on politics and policy, when we expand our understanding of parents, just as we've been expanding our understanding of the family, one of the biggest debates in this country is what? What makes up a family, right? Maybe as we begin to expand our definitions of this, we can actually get more people involved because of that personal connection.
And that's why women on corporate boards, you're the ones that are going to stand up and say, we need pregnancy parking. We need to give our employees time off to watch their children play sports. We need to make sure that dads, if they want to participate, don't feel guilty about it either. You know, businesses are a family of sorts. And frankly, in today's world, it stuns me that people have absolutely no loyalty to a company, and the company has no loyalty to them. Now look, at working 30 years and getting a watch and being forced to retire is not my idea of being rewarded for that loyalty. But we have to figure out something that creates a better balance so that we appreciate our workers and our workers appreciate us. Because we do spend a lot of time in the workforce, more and more. Americans today, we work longer and harder than any of the other developed countries of the world, which means in many respects, too, we don't age well. We get sick. We have heart conditions. We put enormous pressure on ourselves. Let's just step back for a second and say, what makes us human beings? And how can we maximize both our skills at the workplace and our society so that we have fewer kids who find themselves as latchkey kids, or fewer kids today? We're seeing more and more children being cyberbullied and cyberbullying and trying to commit suicide. I mean, what is going on here? And it's that lack of that human touch, and we as women, I think, have got to lead the way and say, enough, enough. It is our time to be with our children. We want this opportunity. They need us there. And you as a company, and I think we can do this, by offering those opportunities, you will find that you'll be a magnet for the best and the brightest to come and work for you.
We've got just about...
I'm used to it. Yes, hi. I'm Sarah Rushenick, and I'm a professor at the University of Miami. And thank you very much for your insightful visions here. What I'm asking is, women don't have a history of being on boards, and we want women to be competent. We want even women, if it's their first time, to be even overconfident. Right. So one of the things I'm asking you is, what are we doing to train women? One is they don't have the self-confidence to be on a board, and two, do they have the right skills and skill sets to give the proper insights? So I think it's important also to look at the education of how we're going to encourage them, not just to say you need 3 women on the board, but these women, how are they going to get the education and training they need? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Good point. You know, part of this is a question of confidence. And part of it is a question of knowing what is expected on these boards and how to achieve it. And my understanding is that this is a group, when you start networking, you'll discover there are these opportunities, these educational experiences, but let us not sell ourselves short. When you think of some of the men who are on these corporate boards, how do they get on these corporate boards? They play golf with the guy who's leaving. They're the son-in-law of one of the longtime board members. That doesn't mean that we don't do our best. You know, when I started off in the movement, and remember Gloria Steinem, that's a long time ago, we used to say that we will have achieved equality when a woman doesn't have to be twice as good to get half as far. But there's nothing wrong with us getting out there and showing these guys how to do it right. And so, again, there certainly are opportunities and skill sets that we may need to work on. I will tell you, though, it won't take a whole lot of time. What we need is we need to get the respect of our male colleagues. That's the number one thing. We need to say, no, you're not going to mansplain that to me. I was saying, listen, I just had my 69th birthday. I work with some young guys in the legislature who are about half my age. I remind them I'm as old as their mothers, and they wouldn't talk to their mothers that way. They're not going to talk to me that way. Right. They're not going to mansplain how something should be done. I've been there a lot longer than they have, and what gives them the right to think that they can even go ahead and try? And you know what? You gotta call them on it. Yep. And oftentimes they don't realize it. But you know what? That is no excuse. So we have to educate as well, but we can do it with a smile on our face.
Right. So folks, we're down to our last 49, 48, 47 seconds here. And I wanted to thank you, Senator.
My pleasure.
For all that you do, for blazing the trail, for inspiring us, for turning ideas into action. It was Barbara Jordan that said, what the people want is simple. They want an America as good as its promise, and we're thankful that you're helping us move that way.
Well, thank all of you, and best of luck. Let's go get them. It's our turn.